Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today. Sitting beside me, Mr. Nick Thomas. Hi, Nick.
Good to see you, Mark.
Welcome to Stay Curious again. Nick, of course, is the lead educator for Delaware North at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex, where he's clocked in there for about 35 years or more. And his knowledge is just incredible. He's been honored with the Holcomb Award and some other Snoopy Award, things like that. That we're so pleased, Nick, that you want to be part of our humble museum here. And he's always does a great job of looking at picking out some missions of July. But boy, July is so full.
A lot of traffic. It's a lot to unpack there.
One of the most active months of the year. I think December's another one. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about this little rocket going to space with Gus Grissom on a very important mission with one of your favorite astronauts. We're going to hear about that. We're going to hear about a Gemini mission and with two incredible astronauts on that. Even got a little bit of Skylab is launched. We've got the crew.
Two moon landings.
And a crew to the our first space station. So, Nick, good to have you here.
Thank you.
And we want to we'll put up here the slide of Delaware North, and we're grateful for them sponsoring us a little bit from time to time. How's business out there?
Oh, man. We are averaging on the order of 5,500 to 6,300 a day. It's just really cooking out there. And I do mean cooking because the weather's coming up on us. But I don't think we've hit peak yet. I think we'll hit peak probably in late July, early August. That's just my guess from boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. But, man, we are busy. We're having a lot of fun. The people are having a lot of fun. They're coming out and they're enjoying the chat with an astronaut. They're also enjoying the stage presentations and the autograph ops that you and Marty have seen. Mm-hmm. And it place is just really jumping, and it's a lot of fun. The day goes by real fast.
It does. And Marty, go ahead. Marty, our co-producer here.
I also noticed today, Nick, they're doing sidewalk art.
Sidewalk art.
Yeah, did you see that?
Haven't seen that yet.
Oh, it's out there just, next near Gateway.
Okay, all right.
Well, those of you that have been out there, we're blessed to be living in our backyard here. Those are the missions we're going to talk about with Nick today. Starbucks is open. I saw the other day.
Up, yep.
And, Gateway has really been a big hit.
Yeah, Gateway is really remarkable. On the ground floor, you've got flown spacecraft. You've got some great mock-ups of some of the things that are being looked at for the future. And then up top side, you've got the four, people call them rides, I call them experiences because they're totally immersive.
Yeah, they are.
So Gateway is, sometimes you see these events open and then just kind of slowly drop off, but the charge, the excitement of Gateway is still right up there. So we're really enjoying that.
Well, I've been in it dozens of times now, possibly. It doesn't get old.
No,
either,
it doesn't.
Man. It doesn't. You kind of look around, and there's interesting things. We got the Alcolar map is represented in there. If you're planning your vacation, you can't be going out to Kennedy Visitors Complex. I always tell people you're going to see the big rocket garden, and don't get mesmerized. Get on that bus right away so you can go out there and see the moon rock.
Mesmerized over at Saturn V.
Yeah, I got Saturn V. You got plenty of time to come back and enjoy the main campus, of course, with Atlantis and all there. And we've got the afternoon showers. I know you've been dodging lightning, even a tornado warning the other day.
We were hemmed in by one of those. Sam Gamar and I were trapped in the Atlantis exhibit, I think, for the better part of 45 minutes waiting for that rain and that tornado warning to clear. So it's Florida. It's no big deal.
That's right. And they say it's hot. That's why we're in Florida.
Now, it's like people ask me, they ask me if it's always this hot. I say, no, it gets hotter.
Yeah, it does. Over 90 days of 90-degree heat.
Hey, we still got August to look forward to.
Yeah, we do. And the hurricanes in there. Nick, we want to thank everybody who participated in Saturday's auction. It was a big hit.
That's great.
Over 370 items were auctioned off. I saw the visor shot go for about $700, just an 8x10 of it on regular photo paper. But thank you all. It's how we keep our our doors open, and Chuck Jeffrey did a great job auctioning things. We'll have another one in the fall, and call us up if you've got space memorabilia. Chuck is always giving free appraisals and checking stuff out there. So, but it's important that we let you know that we do thank you for all you do. And speaking of caught in the rain, I got caught in the rain here with this guy, Mike Baker.
Yeah.
There's astronaut Mike Baker, twice a pilot, twice a commander, and you have had entertained him for many years, I'd say.
Yeah.
He's one of your regulars, and what a great guy to be a regular.
Mike has got all kinds of stories, and not just about spaceflight itself, but also he was part of the apparatus, if you will, that laid the foundation for our cooperation with the Russians, first in Shuttle Mir, and then eventually in the Station Assembly Program. And Mike has all kinds of good stories to tell about his experiences in Russia and his experiences with the Russian people. And he goes through some great detail about the difference between, say, Russians, Europeans, and Americans, and so forth, and how they view life. For instance, we ourselves, we pay a lot of attention to timelines and schedules. The Russian attitude is more like, yeah, we'll get around to that, which is kind of interesting. Of course, it drives our guys nuts. But we learned, especially on board the Mir space station, where they took that more leisurely pace, if you will. And we first came to realize that while a space shuttle is a sprint, a station mission is a marathon. And we learned a lot about that from the Russians. And Mike was a great part of that, and it's always great working with him. He's got some great stories to tell. My favorite is how he was invited to perform the carrier suitability test for the F-18, and that is an assignment any test pilot would give their right arm for. But he declined that because he wanted to go instruct at the Empire Test Pilot School in England. Well, the thing with that was you had to go back to Pax River and serve as an instructor there before you might be invited to come to Boscombe Down to the Empire Test Pilot School. So that was a big throw of the dice to do with your career. He did it, and it worked out for him. And he came out with it, among other things, with a more rounded experiential base, if you will, to bring to the astronaut office. So he'll tell you that timing plays a big part in it, skill plays a big part in it, and luck plays a big part in it.
You're going to hear Mike talk about that, Mike Baker, on Stay Curious. We recorded a show with him, Marty and I did, and he talked about the Empire School, just like you said there, Nick, and he's very humble about his role in Russia, but he was the man that put our astronauts on the our own space station on the Soyuz up there,
and
including Bonnie Dunbar and Ron Guerin.
And as you pointed out when we were talking earlier, John Blaha was Mike's commander on his first flight. And then later on in his career, he ends up picking up John from the Mir space station and bringing him back home. So things come full circle in this business, and it's like show business. It's a lot tighter community than people would think.
And part of his luck, Nick, is he had the 4 missions in like a 7-year span.
Yeah,
he didn't wait around. He said. And he said the training kind of got to him. He wished he'd had a break or two.
He had a good run as far as all that timing was concerned between assignments. Although it was hectic, the training grind can sort of grind you down, and a lot of your training that you do after your first flight, a lot of it is redundant, but it's still necessary. You've got to learn those things again.
That's right.
So it's like Wally Schirra said, that business consumes you. And Mike was in it for 4 flights and then work over in Russia. So I think he got about as much out of this program as any one person
could ask. And he's loving the retirement, laid back. He loves what he does, talking to the public. You got to get Blaha back. Love to see John again.
Yeah,
he was a great visitor there.
But I think John has pretty much called it a day as far as all that's concerned.
Give him a call, Nick.
John is too busy enjoying his grandchildren and his family. So he, like Jerry Ross, has said, okay, it's family time now.
Yeah,
and that's
pretty much well deserved. 2 great astronauts that have really made an impact of your outreach program there. Well, we're going to hear some more great stories from Nick Thomas. So shut up, Mark, and let's get on here with He and one of our childhood heroes for doggone sure, Gus Grissom.
Liberty Bell 7, MR4 as it's known, and what a lot of people forget is it was the first test flight of the orbital version of the Mercury capsule. This was a version that John Glenn would use with the trapezoidal window and so forth, and of course the explosive hatch that everyone likes to talk about. But 15 minutes, 115 miles up, about 400 miles downrange, as I recall, and a successful mission, but for the landing. Here's a beautiful picture of Gus in the White Room getting ready to board Liberty Bell 7, and if you look behind him, you'll see his backup pilot, John Glenn, looking into the capsule. And of course, our friend Gunther Wendt is there, and it's just the excitement that you have on launch day, and the quiet professionalism that sort of reigns in the White Room. We're going to talk about that a little later when we get to STS 114.
Okay.
But yeah, this is Gus getting ready for the Liberty Bell 7 flight.
His space suit is at this Kennedy Visitors Complex in the Astronaut Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And I love the concave mirror there, okay?
The Hero Medal.
It's your medal?
No, they called it the Hero Medal.
Oh, really?
They gave it a nickname of the Hero Medal.
I've never seen one outside on his uniform now.
Well, see, we
tell us what that was for, Nick.
Well, that was so the onboard automated camera could capture the switch positions of the control panel looking into the mirror. It wasn't photographically, it wasn't all that good, but you could certainly tell which event lights were lit up green and which ones were lit up red, so that would give you a record of the status of each switch during at any time during the mission. I think they finally stopped wearing that for Gordon Cooper's flight, the last Mercury flight. They just didn't feel it had any value to the mission.
Well, if they had to look at the date off that, Nick, you probably were dead, and you probably were a hero. But the Hero Medal,
that was just a name they came up. I don't know where it originated from, but just the idea is like those big medals the South American dictators would award themselves, and so that's where it came from.
Yes, Marty.
Nick, what's on his left wrist? It looks like a watch, which I'm sure it probably is.
That's actually the pressure gauge for the suit, and that suit was kept at 4.2 psi pure O2. So that was a way of monitoring your suit pressure, make sure you didn't have a leak or were losing any pressure, and you weren't over pressurizing as well. But I think the normal mission parameter was 4.1 psi. A picture of the recovery, of course, famous for the fact that Liberty Bell 7 was lost, and there's been all sorts of discussion all throughout the years about that. I think Gus rightfully felt that the press was a little too hard on him after that mission. Well, are you sure you didn't do anything wrong? So, no, I said I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. And as far as supposition, the helicopter pilot has said that he thought that it was an electrostatic charge built up by the rotors over the capsule that may have electronically set that explosive off. For myself, I personally believe it was set by a unintentionally deployed lanyard. On the outside of the capsule, if the astronaut were incapacitated, a member of the ground crew could open up a panel on the outside of that capsule and pull out this lanyard that would carry about from here to about where Marty is, and you pull that lanyard and that would blow the hatch. Well, as the capsule was coming down on a parachute, Gus noted that there was a hole, perhaps 6 inches by 6 inches in the parachute. And in my view, and view of a lot of other people, that door probably came off the side of the capsule when the parachute deployed and went up and cut that hole in the parachute. And then once the capsule splashed down and was rocking on the water and the landing bag was filling full of water, that handle with the that deployment handle tumbled out into the water and got tangled up in the landing bag and was pulled, and that caused the hatch to explode. That's just my personal analysis of it.
How close you think he came to drowning?
Quite close. The suit was filling up with water because he'd forgotten to close the vent in his suit that was the inlet for the oxygen. And that was causing the suit to not only lose buoyancy, but also to fill with water. So he came very close. He swallowed more than his share of seawater in that recovery, and yeah, I think he came quite close to
Yeah.
drowning.
He was well composed on the aircraft carrier, but I think in private he probably thanked his lucky
Well,
stars.
you know, it's a hell of a thing to get away from, to escape from, and you know, when you come that close, yeah, it's going to cause a little bit of
Yeah.
angst, if you will.
Side note there, Marty, you're familiar with that helicopter. Show it up there big time there. Tell us what that helicopter is.
That's a Sikorsky UH-34D. It's the same helicopter that Marines use in Vietnam.
Hmm.
And Marty was a Marine in Vietnam in that first
On those
wave.
helicopters.
You jumped. You did a lot of shimmying out of that thing, right?
Well, it's called
bet-
repelling.
Rappelling, yeah, shimmy. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is called rappelling, and he can rappel like a squirrel. I
Yeah.
tell you, man, he's in good shape there. Yeah, so the Marines are called on board there, and what was remember the aircraft carrier?
That was the Randolph, USS
There you
Randolph.
go,
That was a
Randolph.
recovery ship.
And us, if you had memorabilia from the Randolph in this mission, I think some of it was in our auction there. But there's the beautiful.
There's the launch.
Yep. Tell us a little about that beautiful day.
A beautiful countdown and some wonderful conversation between Stoney, who was Deke Slayton, and Gus in the capsule, and you know, verifying that all the sequences were taking place at the proper time, making sure he had no sun in his eyes from the periscope, and all the rest of that stuff. And I think at T-minus 30 seconds, Deke said, "Okay, have a good trip, Dad. We'll see you below." And what was the after liftoff was Deke said, "Loud and clear, Jose. Don't cry too much." And Gus said, "Okie doke." So that's the kind of transmissions you don't hear in manned spaceflight anymore, unfortunately. But of course, Gus and Deke were very close. The launch itself, just a gorgeous day, just a perfect day for it. And he had undergone a scrub or two before that because of weather. And I think the weather was so bad so early that Bill Douglas, the flight surgeon, woke him up over in Hangar S and said, "Go back to sleep. We ain't going today." So yeah, it was a bit getting that mission off the ground, and a very successful flight in that he tested the manual control system on board the capsule. I think even to a larger extent than Al Shepard had on Freedom 7. There have been changes to that system, some that Gus had helped to develop himself. So as an engineering test flight, it was very useful. It was very successful, and of course the problems only came after splashdown.
Mm-hmm. And there is the launch.
This is a picture that was taken by Ralphie Morris of Life magazine when the original 7 were selected, and Life magazine won the contract to cover the astronauts' personal lives. Ralphie Morris was assigned as the photographer, and as the reporters were doing the background story on each astronaut, a part of it was what's your personal life, what are your hobbies, this sort of thing. And this is a picture that Ralphie got of Gus at the end of his dock at his home in Virginia, just casting his line out for a fish. And I think if there's a picture to remember Gus Grissom by, I think he would have liked this one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he was a real outdoorsman. He was a fisherman and a huntsman, and he loved the outdoors and he loved nature. And I think this is very appropriate for a picture to remember
Sure
Gus
is.
by.
He grew up in southern Indiana.
Mhm.
His boyhood home's become a shrine
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
And thanks to his brother Lowell and other people keeping the dream alive there, his name alive. So we do honor our Mercury astronauts. And I'm going to show you our Spaceview Park. There is, of course, Robert Goddard on the paver there. Marty and I always love talking about Robert Goddard. And there's the beautiful Mercury 7, named after the winged messenger Mercury of Roman gods. And the 7, well, 6 of the astronaut handprints are there, and a nice relief bust of Gus's there, as well as the names in brick of people who donated money to this.
Yeah.
And well, let's move on to another July launch of
1966, Gemini 10 with John Young and Mike Collins. Here they are outside the mission control, the old mission control center on Cape Canaveral. You recognize by that antenna.
Mm-hmm.
Although they were using Houston, Texas by this time. But you can see Mike has that tinted faceplate raised, and that, of course, indicates that he's going to be doing a spacewalk on this mission, which he did. John's second Gemini flight, of course, he'd flown the inaugural flight, Gemini 3, with Gus Grissom, and now was commanding this mission. And this mission was going to be a dual rendezvous mission in that John and Mike were going to rendezvous with their own Agena booster, use it to boost themselves up to a higher altitude. And they would also rendezvous with the dead Agena booster from Gemini 8. And Mike performed a spacewalk on that mission and went over and retrieved a micrometeorite package from that dead Agena. Here's a view of the live Agena setting off its engine to bring the guys up to an altitude record of 750 miles. And that was later broken by the Gemini 11 crew, who made it up to 850 miles. Now, coming up, perhaps at the end of this year or thereafter, Jared Isaacman and his crew on the Polaris Dawn mission, they're going to break Gemini 11's record. They are going to be the highest Earth orbiting crew in history. Now, I don't know what the parameter is, but they are going to be crossing 850 miles above the Earth, and they're also going to be performing the first civilian spacewalk on that flight. So you see, as one record is established, it soon falls by the wayside. Another is brought forward.
60 years later,
60
though.
years later, sure. But now this picture reminds me of the a great story that was in Mike Collins' book on Carrying the Fire. Once you docked with the Agena, you sent commands to the Agena by the means of a command box, and it was probably about so by so, and it had two concentric telephone dials, one inside the other, and then a switch on the bottom. The outer dial was the first number of the command, the second inner dial was the second number of the command, and the third number was either 0 or 1, and that was commanded by the little toggle switch on the bottom. So you had to send a series of commands to the Agena using this bulky device. And the problem was, if you got to the next to last command and you made a mistake, you had to go all the way back and you had to start all over again. So they're in a simulation, and Mike has got to use this command box to send, I think it was 30 or 40 commands to the Agena in this simulation. And, you know, just thinking about doing everyone perfectly right, it's a daunting task. So John Young looked at the situation and he told Mike, he says, "I don't think you can do it, babe." And Mike said, "Care to make it interesting?" So they decided to bet one martini on each command.
Ooh.
And as Mike sent the commands, the bet continued to double and compound and so forth, until by the time it was over, Mike had sent all 40 commands absolutely perfectly, and John owed him 725 martinis.
Wow. What a good story, Nick Thomas. That is something else from two of our great heroes of the Gemini
Carrying
era.
the Fire.
That's in Carrying the Fire, huh?
Yes, yeah.
I'll have to reread that.
Well, the great
I
thing
read these 30, 40 years ago, and I don't remember them all. That's a good one, Carrying the Fire.
Yeah. And Mike said in the preface of the book, he says, hopefully you can open up this book to anywhere and find something interesting going on, and it's true.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, revisit that. And we're going to talk Apollo 11 all week, and I'm going to do a segment Wednesday highlighting some of the books out there.
Yeah.
And that's on the top of the list up there for darn sure. One of the first ones out there. Well, a great crew.
Yeah.
Mike Collins, of course, Apollo 11 orbited the moon. He didn't care. He didn't feel forgotten or anything. He enjoyed that role.
He was just a remarkable man, and you get a flavor of Mike Collins when you read Carrying the Fire. And of course, you know, things folks have said about him. Lots of balance. I think that was the highest compliment I've ever heard paid to Mike Collins. And this is either just before or just after that EVA on Gemini 10, which was difficult but was accomplished. And you compare this with the previous mission, Gemini 9, when Gene Cernan had the spacewalk from hell and just worked himself up into a lather and had to go back in. We talked about that last month. And those two spacewalks really kind of highlight the personalities of each man. You've got Gene Cernan, who's very focused and mission-oriented and getting that goal done and so forth. And he applies himself to the nth degree and he wears himself out. Whereas Mike, who had more of a laid-back personality, he pushed off from the Gemini to go over to the Gemini 8 Agena for that micrometeorite package. So he pushes off from the Gemini, and he doesn't push through a center of mass, and he ends up tumbling head over, or as he called it, ass over tea kettles. And he's tumbling toward the Agena, and his whole thing is, well, this is interesting, isn't it? So, and he gets over there, and just by luck, he's able to grab that docking, that ring around the docking collar, which was dangerous because they saw after the rendezvous that that ring had broken, and the one end of it was like a sharpened scythe.
Ooh.
It was very dangerous, and John said, "Don't get near that." So luckily, as he reached out, he must have grabbed the right part of that docking ring and stabilized himself and got that micrometeorite package. But Mike Collins' favorite story about him is during the training of Apollo 11, he's flying back to Ellington with Deke Slayton in the back seat, and Deke saying he's going to get him cranked into command Apollo 20, and Mike said, "No thanks." And Deke said, "What?" And Mike said, "Deke," he said, "when this is over, I'm hanging up my helmet. I'm going to go home. I'm going to grow my roses. I'm going to drink my wine, and I'm going to make love to my wife." So that was it for Mike. So a wonderful guy, an incredible, just an incredible man to have in the program, and the right person to be that first man in the command module waiting for his compatriots to come back from the surface of the moon. He tells a story in Carrying the Fire about something, checklist that the command module pilot had called the solo book. And the solo book was basically what you had to do if you had to leave your compatriots behind, come home by yourself. And the solo book was something you didn't carry around with you in front of the other two guys.
Right.
You didn't study it in front of the other two guys. And you did your sims on the solo book when the other two guys were doing EVA training. So it was not a topic for light crew conversation.
That's very. I had not heard about the solo book.
Yeah, again, Carrying the Fire.
And there's the. I wanted to point out there the helmet. When you sat down, your nose is even covered up by the helmet.
Yeah,
there.
well, that's why you had that tie-down cable. I don't know if you can make it out in that picture, but there's a cable that comes down here to a central wheel, a central pivot, and you pull the strap down, and that tightens the helmet down around your head in case the suit is fully inflated for any reason.
Well, what a beautiful picture you painted, Nick, of that EVA going between two Agena rockets.
Yeah.
That's something that a cinematographer ought to do, or Chris Calley, or one of our great friends out there, Doug Forrest, ought to paint that.
I have to go back and look at From Earth to the Moon and see they dramatized that in that miniseries. But I'll tell you, there was a good representation on the original copy of Mike's first book. Mm-hmm. The book jacket has a depiction of him tumbling from the Gemini over to the Agena.
All right. Well, we're going to talk more about him in just a minute, I'm sure, but wanted to just what we're all about here. Our U.S. Space Walk of Fame Foundation dedicated the Gemini Monument in November 1997. And that's the Gemini 9 paver there, Stafford and Cernan. Pavers of all the missions are there. And up on the left side, you see these pylons shaped like the 2, the Roman numeral God 2 in there. And there's John Young's handprints. Now, since this picture was taken, the county's cleaned up those 2 pedestals there.
That's good.
The rebar was coming through there, but there's in John Young Parkway, we always hear about the accidents on it every morning.
Well, my favorite story about that was John said that some little old lady wrote him a letter one time and said, "You need to take better care of your parkway. It's a shambles." Lady, that's not mine. They just named it after me.
Exactly. Born in San Francisco, but he grew up in Orlando. And got the moonrise one night over the 2 there.
And it's a good shot.
And on the marble there, those are the workers from the different contractors that work this. I can't get enough of Gemini. I was a young teenager. Every 6 weeks, 2 men were going to space. And the only what was the Twitter of the day to find out the most information? AM radio, in between all those great rock and roll songs, was the news. Well, there we are. 54 years ago.
Apollo
Sure went by
11.
pretty fast, Nick.
Yeah, and again, a story from Carrying the Fire was when Mike said when they were discussing this patch, it was said that when an eagle carried a branch to its nest, it carried it not in its talons, but in its beak. So I think there was an early sketch of this patch with the olive branch in the beak. And they looked at it and they said it looked like the bird had a Fu Manchu. So they said, well, let's just go ahead and kind of screw with reality here, and we'll put it in his claws and take the hits from the Audubon people later.
There you go. Well, a lot of variations of this patch and lot knowledge about these.
And of course, too, the point being made that there are no names on this patch because it was a salute to all the men and women, 400,000 people around the country who'd made Apollo possible.
And the commander decided that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then what other lunar mission did we have that didn't have names on
Well,
the
Apollo
patch?
13, which only had the Latin motto "Ex Luna Scientia," from the moon comes science.
Yeah.
So, and again, the idea that this was bigger than 3 people going to the moon. And there are the big 3 there: Neil Armstrong, Mike Collins, and Buzz Aldrin. I think all of us remember where we were, certainly during the landing and during the lunar EVA. I was privileged to be 12 miles away from the launch at the time over here in Titusville, just across the river. And it was one of those moments where just from the moment of waking to the event and even past it, you consciously drank in every detail of the moment because you realize that you're watching history that no one was ever going to see again. And you fully appreciated that. And I've been able to carry that over into what I get to do today, which is to enjoy the history that I learned from these men and women who have actually made the history. So it was a definitive moment for myself, and I'm sure for everyone else who was there to see it. And certainly the landing is one of those things that everybody remembers where they were when it happened. And 99.9% of them were sitting in front of their television set.
And
here's
black and white televisions too.
well, it didn't matter if it was black and white or color because transmissions were coming down in black and white. Here's Buzz standing alongside the solar wind experiment designed to gather particles from the solar wind. And after the walk was over, they rolled that up and brought that back home with them. And of course, in the background, you can see the Eagle, the lunar module, with the American flag on the side. And it was just simply a moment that everyone realized that this was not only the culmination of one dream expressed back in 1961, but this was something that all of us around the globe could feel a part of, because in a very large way, and as the plaque says, here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon. It didn't say here men from America, it said here from the planet Earth. So I think that was the realization, and properly so, that this was an accomplishment that the entire world could share, and I think rightfully did.
Well, what beautiful way to put it, Nick. I was 15 years old, and of course, eat up with astronauts. And
Of course, at that age, I was saying, yeah, we beat the Russians.
That's right, we beat the Russians. But for me, the 5 years I've been involved with the American Space Museum, like yourself, I wake up saying, how did this happen? That I know Marty Winkle, a man that has his gloved hands all over this lunar module number 5 there, and to know Lee Solid and Charlie Mars and so forth. We've always called them national treasures, and the astronauts give them due credit. But Marty just it's amazing to know you and know you the way I do, and he's so humble about his role in this.
Marty, any stories about LEM 5?
I'd have to think about it, Nick. Nothing. I mean, working on a vehicle, working in the cabin, I installed the pyros on it. I remember laying there on my belly, looking between the ascent descent stage, thinking one day this is going to be. It seemed like it's antiquated, like it's just an old machine.
And speaking of the pyro devices, on Apollo 12, as they're getting ready for the power descent initiation, you could hear who was Al Bean saying, "Don't forget to tell him about the ED bats." He says, "Yeah, don't forget the ED bats today." And those were the explosive device batteries that would trigger the separation of ascent and descent stage. And apparently, through some of the simulations, the guys forgot to give that parameter to mission control. They had to, hey, don't forget, we got to have the ED bats. Okay, so that's what they're talking about just before PDI.
Well, it's an amazing, man's greatest adventure, and it still is. When we go back, whoever goes back, I hope it's in my lifetime. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, it will be.
But good, I hope so. This is going to look like Conestoga wagons, compared to
As it should.
As it should.
As
yeah.
it should. Yeah, we should be able to look.
Well,
back.
I mean, proud of that. Not in a derogatory way.
Oh
but
no,
at least,
absolutely.
what ingenuity and human beings, hands all over this thing.
Yeah, but after you land that second time, you look back at those Apollo landings and say, "Boy, we really did do something fantastic."
Yeah.
We didn't realize how little we had, but of course at the time it was a pot of gold, that technology.
Well, we honor the whole program out this beautiful Spaceview Park, the Apollo Monument there. All around it are these panels in bronze that Sandy Storm, a sculpturist, did, and President Kennedy standing there, full life, and Neil Armstrong's handprints over there on the left. Those pylons there are names like Marty's and other space workers, contractors that gave us $100. Don't you wish Kennedy Space Center, they give us $100? We'll put your name up on a wall up there. I work for Newsweek. I'd love to see that in the Big Apple, where you also lived for a while.
It's remarkable, as you say, to go to those pylons and look at the names of the men and women who were involved in this program. And again, Marty had given me the gracious opportunity to meet the Grumman guys at their last reunion, and to hear the stories from those men and women. It was just breathtaking. And just remarkable, the things that they accomplished, and the high degree of professionalism of that entire Grumman team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolute pride in their craft. And
it's funny because we talk about pride, and I will tell you that it's not so much pride as much as it is humility. You're involved in a program like that. You're grateful to be involved in a program like that. You realize the historic significance of what you're involved in. And quite aside from pumping you up with pride, which brings with it arrogance, it brings a sense of humility and professionalism that's just absolutely unrivaled. And if you talk to any of these astronauts, you will get a good idea as to the amount of humility they learned, not only from their selection as astronauts, but looking back at the years. So I would say that these programs have been powered as much by humility as they have been by pride.
Great observation, Nick. We're talking to Nick Thomas here, who's met a few Apollo astronauts through his career out there at the Kennedy Visitors Complex. We nickname him the astronaut wrangler out there in a good way. But it is my favorite visual mission is the Apollo 15 is also a July mission, launched at the end of the month, and the moonwalk was actually August 4th, I think. But you have, don't know if you knew Irwin very well, but I'm sure you met Uncle Al a few times.
Well, Al Warden was a good friend for many years. Jim Irwin I got to meet probably about a year before he passed, and I helped him with the presentation he was doing one Sunday over the Visitors Complex. And after it finished, and I was helping him break down his equipment and get everything squared away, he told me a great story that I'll never forget. During one of the traverses during Apollo 15, they were on a very tight timeline because they had to go from point to point in a certain time. And they were at one traverse point, they're heading back to the rover to move on to the next. And Jim looked out to his left, and on the surface of the moon he saw one rock sitting on top of another. And he asked himself, how does that come to happen on the moon? So he turns to go get the rock, and they see him on a TV camera in mission control. And they tell him, Jim, got to get back to the rover. We got to get to the next traverse point. He says, I'll be right there. And he goes over, he picks that rock up, and he brings it back. The geologists looked at it after the mission, and they determined that at that time, it was the oldest sample ever brought back from the moon. They called it the Genesis rock. And that story proves that there are two things a human being can do that a computer can't. initiate creative thought, and disobey orders.
Very well.
So
put
thank
there.
God for Jim Irwin. I mean, just a wonderful guy. And there's just not enough you could say about Al Worden. Al, who wrote 2 wonderful books about his experiences in space and after space flight. Remarkable, warm, and generous man. A lot of enthusiasm for what he was doing, which was conveying the story of Apollo to newer generations, and a man of immense warmth and kindness and good humor and enthusiasm. So, Al Worden, we miss you.
We sure do.
Yeah.
David Scott's 92 years old. The other 2 passed away. We forgot to mention that, of course, Buzz is 93 years old.
Yeah.
And posted a Twitter on his launch day the other day, Sunday.
Dave, I had the chance to meet once during a commemorative event for Apollo 15, an anniversary for Apollo 15. We did it over at the Saturn V Center, and of course Jim was not with us, but the show consisted of Al Worden and Dave Scott, and taking Jim's place was Dick Gordon. Now, if you remember Dick Gordon, he had a very, very wonderful and exuberant sense of humor, as did Al. Dave tended to take things a little more straight line, a little more seriously, and one of the guys said that Dave Scott, having Al Worden and Dick Gordon there, he was like the father telling the kids in the back seat of the car to calm down or he was going to pull over. So they were a very enthusiastic group.
That would be a group
Yeah.
there. Yeah, Dick Gordon and Al Worden together. That would have to be a
Oh,
blast.
yes, it was. It was.
They both like to kid and have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Of course, Apollo 15 had the first lunar rover.
Yep.
It popped over the Hadley Mountain right down on a lunar lava rill that had collapsed. Well, it was a fantastic
Hadley.
mission there. And these Apollo astronauts and some of the Mercury astronauts, when they were in Gemini 2, got to drive these Corvettes. What's the story behind that?
Now, these Corvettes were by the blessing, if you will, of Jim Rathman, who was a Chevrolet dealer in Cocoa Beach. Now, back in the late 50s, around the time the original 7 had been selected and everybody knew they were coming to Cape Canaveral, Jim, being a former Indianapolis 500 winner, he was given he got a franchise for Chevrolet, and the Chevrolet people said, well, you got a couple of choices. We can either locate you in Miami or we can locate you in Cocoa Beach. And at the time, of course, Miami was just booming, was just jumping. Cocoa Beach was a very sleepy, small, nobody ever heard of it kind of a place. And Rathman said, I'll take Cocoa Beach, because he knew what was coming. And he knew that pilots loved cars the way cars love pilots. So he set up a deal with them, starting with the original 7, that they could lease these Corvettes, which were dealers' demonstration models. They could lease these Corvettes for $1 a year. And if they wanted to buy them out, they'd get a good deal on that too. So you had a lot of Corvette fever. And I will tell you, that beyond a shadow of doubt, that it was the NASA astronauts who made Corvette America's sports car. So, of course, the stories of these Corvettes on Cape Canaveral are absolutely legendary and too many to go into now. But this is another one of the great photographs showing the astronauts with their Corvettes. And you can see these kind of photographs throughout the program. Some of the famous ones from Apollo 12 come to mind. But there you got Jim Irwin on the left, you got Al in the center, and Dave Scott on the right, as I recall. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful cars, and just suited to the men who are going to be driving them.
Stripes are different. White and black for Jim,
Right.
black and red for Al,
Exactly.
and white and red for Dave there.
Now, I will also point to a number of the former astronauts who still indulge in the Corvette craze, which include Winston Scott. Winston's got a Corvette.
Melnick.
Fred Gregory has a Corvette. Melnick, I believe, still has a Corvette. So, yeah, that's the kind of thing. Once it gets into your blood, it doesn't come out very easily.
Yes, sir, they do. Yeah, I see Winston and Melnick roar out of there in their little fancy cars there. But well, we've got another mission. We wanted to go up there between our Apollo area and the Shuttle Monument, our beautiful Spaceview Park. We do celebrate the Apollo Soyuz test project out there, and this is in 1974. 5 when this happened in July.
Yeah.
A Russian and an American shook hands in space.
And one of the most beautiful patches of the
It is
space
an
program.
awesome
Just
patch.
awesome, yeah.
That had been kind of unheard of when we were walking on the moon just 6 years earlier, but that happened.
Well, some of the guys will tell you that this coming together of the U.S. and the Soviet Union in space really originated after Gemini 5, when the crew went to the Paris Air Show, and they ran into Alexei Leonov and his co-pilot on the mission where Alexei performed the first human spacewalk. And they got together and they were shaking hands, and of course all the photographers and people were pressing and taking pictures and so forth. So Gordo said, let's go over here and where we get some privacy. And they went into, I think it was a Russian transport aircraft, and they spent about 30 or 45 minutes sitting there talking to each other and getting to know each other. And it was really, as you say, unheard of, but I think that was the very first exploration of cross-cultural discussion that we saw in the space program. I think after that it was kind of low profile, low key, but I think the managers saw this and knew eventually that this was going to come to something more important than sitting together in a transport airplane, that we were going to have a chance at some time to establish a real cooperation between the two nations. And it all culminated with ASTP in 1975.
The Russians launched their Soyuz with Leonov on there and Kubasov.
Mm-hmm.
We launched our Soyuz there with Tom Stafford in command, Vance Brand, and Deke Slayton, original Mercury astronaut.
And that was one of the things a lot of us were focusing on. A lot of us who had followed the program since we were kids, and I guess we were still kids.
Yeah.
It wasn't the docking between the Russians and the Americans. It was going to be the space flight for Deke Slayton that we all looked forward to, and we all felt he'd been robbed of back in Mercury, but now he was going to space. And as I understand it from Deke's book, he said that when he submitted that crew lineup, he submitted himself as being the mission commander.
Oh,
and
okay.
Management said, "Nah, you're a rookie, Deke. We're going to need a veteran for this one." And originally, Jack Swigert was going to be on this crew, but he was replaced by Vance Brand because Jack got tangled up in what I'll call the contraband issue of carrying unauthorized postal covers and the like up into space, where he was asked about it. He originally denied it, and then he came back and said, "I want to change my statement." They said, "Okay, we appreciate you telling the truth. Clean out your desk, you're fired." So,
Okay.
very unfortunate, and I think very unfair, but nevertheless. But there you got the two crews, and there you got that first moment, opening the hatch, and the historic handshake in orbit. And I think it's a picture that deservedly goes in the annals of spaceflight history just as much as the first pictures on the surface of the moon. Now, if you look in the foreground, you see the shadow of another astronaut, and that was Deke Slayton. And I was told by Jack Lausma that Deke was actually not supposed to be there, but he kind of drifted into the picture accidentally on purpose, for which I cannot blame him. But there's a historic handshake. And here we have Tom and Deke. They're inside the Soyuz here, and they're holding a couple toothpaste tubes which contain borscht, but they had taken labels from two famous Russian vodkas and put them on the toothpaste tubes, just sort of an in-house prank, a joke, if you will. But that's Tom and Deke up on board the Soyuz spacecraft, and I can't help but look at that picture and think what must have been going through Deke's mind, that here he is finally experiencing spaceflight after so many years of waiting, being the consummate test pilot,
being the bridegroom,
and always sending the crews out in the van and never being able to go himself. But here he was finally up on orbit. And again, in his book, he mentioned that after this flight, he started to put out feelers about possibly flying a shuttle mission, but nobody was really interested. So after the approach and landing tests, he left NASA and went into private business, bringing forward the Conestoga wagon, which was going to be the first commercial rocket ever launched. But unfortunately, the business plan did not pan out, and it wasn't until years later when Elon Musk came along and made that a thing, as
Yeah,
they
the
say
Yankee
today.
Clipper,
And the Yankee Clipper of Pete Conrad's.
Yeah.
But again, the business model just didn't pan out, and it wasn't until much later on in life that Elon Musk came forward. But if you want to be successful in the rocket business, you had to be a billionaire or a trillionaire.
Well, the General Stafford there is
Yeah.
92 or 3 years old.
Yeah.
His museum on I-4 west of Oklahoma City in his hometown of Weatherford is an incredible place. It is filled with Russian paraphernalia in there, particularly a lot of vodka bottles autographed by Russians and cosmonauts. They got a whole display of that in there. We go on and on about this mission, so monumental, turned the eyes of the world probably at these two superpowers cooperating in space. You've got a final picture there of the.
This is a picture I wanted to put in because it really salutes the ASTP team, where the flight crew is concerned. These are the prime crew, the backup crew, and the support crew. And going from left to right, we've got Bob Crippen, looking closely.
Overmeyer?
Bob Overmeyer, and then Dick Truly, Bo Bobko next. Then you've got prime crew of Deke Slayton, Tom Stafford, and Vance Brand. And then alongside them, the backup crew, Jack Klausma, Ron Evans, and backup commander Alan Bean. So they're all there in the consoles in the simulator room, posing together in those terrible brown flight suits. I really don't know how he made that transition. The first time I saw those brown flight suits was when the crew came off the helicopter from Apollo 17, and I said, what in the heck is that? Where's that beautiful blue that I'm so used to? But they wore those all throughout the ASTP and Skylab programs, and it wasn't until the shuttle that our crews got back to the beautiful blue flight suits that we've all come to know and love.
I agree. There's something about the fire retardant
It
colors
was
or
untreated
something like
fire
that.
retardant, and that's why they were the color they were. We have another name for that color, which I won't express right now, but let's call it BS Brown and leave it at that.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we did sneak in Skylab. It launches at the end of July, the second crew to go up. Tell us a little bit about those crew members there.
Remarkable crew, Alan Bean, Jack Lausma, and Owen Garriott. And the takeaway from Skylab 2 was this crew came home and they had accomplished 150% of their stated mission objectives. And that was because they finished with the published flight plans so early that Al Bean said, "You got anything else for us to do?" And the scientists said, "Yeah, let's go ahead and do this and do that." And so they worked on this incredible flight plan extension, if you will, and were able to bring in all those results over and above what they already had planned for. The downside is that this set a frightening precedent because the guys on the ground now expected the next crew to follow this same, and not everybody's cut out like Al Bean, who can go without lunch and just work straight through the night if he has to. So they imposed this kind of workload on the next crew of Jerry Carr and Ed Gibson and Bill Pogue, and it did not go well because it simply did not give the crew time to just breathe between events. And they shut down for a day, and then they got on the horn after that, and they said, let's have a discussion of this workload and let's work something out, which they did. But still, we did not really understand the work tempo of a long-duration spaceflight crew until we worked with the Russians. Mm-hmm. And we learned from them that a long-duration orbital flight is more like a marathon than a sprint. And we learned that lesson to the degree that we now have much better work schedules on board the International Space Station. But it's all a learning curve.
Well, the ambitiousness of Skylab 2 doesn't surprise me with Jack Lausma, having spent a few private hours with that wonderful man.
Jack.
He loves talking about Skylab at age 87.
The great thing about Jack is he comes to the theater, he comes to the visitor center, and he is able to show people the amount of impact Skylab had on board the International Space Station. Here's what we did in Skylab, and here's what it led to.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack, when he was advising either NASA or Boeing on space station design, he was a big proponent of that cupola, that seven-windowed canopy, if you will, that the crews all love. And management just fought that idea tooth and nail for a long time. We had that cupola sitting on the high bay floor of the space station processing facility for the better part of 3 years before it was finally cleared to be part of the design program. One of the last things they put up there. And now, as I say, you couldn't do without it.
Right.
Yeah.
Just for the mental break that you
Well,
need.
even more importantly, and the mental break is a lot, but more importantly, you've got berthing operations for these uncrewed vehicles like the Cygnus and so forth. You have to reach out with the robot arm, grapple that thing, and bring it back and hook it up to the connecting node. And there's just no way you could have done that without the cupola. So operationally, it's very, very important. As far as the crew morale is concerned, it's also very important. There's no small bit of importance there. The cupola, as I say, has 7 windows, and each window has a cover, so you can protect them from micrometeorite impacts. And I always thought that possibly the ground could independently close and open those shutters, sort of like, okay, if you guys do good work today, we'll open the shutters for you and let you have a view out the window. But that's not the case. Those are all manually controlled by knobs up on the station.
Interesting. I've never asked anybody about that. That's a good question there. Well, we're enjoying a conversation with Nick Thomas as he comes on once a month to share about the crewed missions of the month. And here is our Space View Park shuttle area there. Quite beautiful. Granite has every orbiter is highlighted around there. The only place in the world is an homage like this.
Yeah, and the designs on top of these central pillars for Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and for the Space Shuttle are beautiful works of art, particularly this one of the Space Shuttle. It's a representation of the original Space Shuttle patch, and it is just beautiful. It's just gorgeous.
Company in Pittsburgh, Sandmeyer,
well
did
done.
the stainless steel there
Nicely
on there.
done.
11 shuttles of the month of
wow.
July. And I was telling you before we got going here, Nick, that on this July 17th, we have 7. The first 7 are in orbit as we speak with a crew of 42 on there. The last one being launched July 15th with Julie Payette, the Canadian, on there. And she certainly was a big hit.
Oh, gosh. People are still
Complex.
writing about her. Yeah.
And she's coming at the end of October.
Coming back in October, and
she hopes she enjoyed it.
Yeah, I
can't imagine she didn't.
I had the privilege of being with her on her orientation and training day, and I was scheduled to be with her on one day during her stay, but unfortunately I fell ill and I wasn't able to work with her. But I'm really looking forward to her coming back and being able to work with her, because so much I've heard from not just from the mails that you get, but also from the people who come in. When's Julie coming back? She was great. They really enjoyed her. So we're very much looking forward to having her back.
We were sorry you missed her there, but glad you're better. But
I
she was.
I had the fun of spending that one day with her, and she was just as gracious, as charming, and just what's the word I'm looking for? Enthusiastic.
Yeah, she had awesome attitude. It was just she was at the Scholarship Foundation Hall of Fame and there, and I think she really enjoyed it. And a lot of Canadians showed up for her. My gosh,
naturally, sure.
The theater was full of them in there. So those are shuttles of the month.
She was Chris Hadfield.
Exactly. Yeah, he's not been there.
No,
you can't afford him.
Chris is beyond our reach.
Yeah, he's. With 68 crewmen, 15 of them are women, and we love talking about them on Stay Curious. Nick's got a couple he's going to talk about here.
Yeah, this SS-114, another inflection point in the space program, in that it was a recovery flight following the loss of the Columbia. And this crew, remarkable crew led by Eileen Collins, who I've been privileged to learn about from people who've flown with her, and they just point to her as being one of the outstanding leaders of the shuttle program, an outstanding commander. And again, like Mike Collins, a lot of balance, just a lot of ground level, this is the way to get it done kind of thing. She inspires a lot of confidence among the people she flies with and the people she works with. And I met her many years ago when she was here with Kathy Sullivan. They were doing a show together. And we spent some time, we chatted for a while. And then she came back to the Visitors Complex a few years ago when her book came out. She was doing a signing of her book. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go over and see her because I was, doing all my astronaut encounter work. But Bruce Melnick went over there and got a book of hers and had her sign it for me.
Oh.
And he brought it back to the office that afternoon, and he said, read what she put. And I opened it up, and it said, Nick, thanks for keeping the astronauts fat, dumb, and happy. And so, yeah, I can see she'd be a real inspiration, a real team builder. And she's one of those people who came along at the right time in history, much like Wally Schirra, who led us from the recovery after Apollo 1, Al Shepard, who led us from in the recovery after Apollo 13, and then, of course, Rick Houck, who led us in the recovery after the Lost Challenger. Right person, right time, right place, and a remarkable leader and commander. So hats off to Eileen Collins.
Been a warm person.
And read her book. Learn some stories about the program. Read her book.
Have not yet, but Jonathan Ward, a friend of ours, wrote it with her, and they spent countless hours together. That's one I haven't read, but will. And I've met her several times, walked off an elevator with her. You think she's selling Avon or something, but
well, aside of that, that's rather a sexist thing to say, but I'll take the
well, she's a charming, humble lady that you look at and you go, you commanded a space shuttle and piloted to, I mean, it's really...
But isn't that the way?
You're just...
The ones who do it best are the most humble and the most down-to-earth of all.
And she's so easy to talk to, just like your friend in the middle there, Wendy Lawrence, who was important on the manipulator arm on this mission.
Get me started on Wendy Lawrence. There's someone I can't say enough good things about. I've been privileged to know her since just after STS-114 when she came on board with us. She tells great stories. She tells them not only from the technical but also from the human standpoint, and has taught me so much, not only about spaceflight, but also about helicopter pilots. Remarkable people. Everyone tends to think of the fighter pilots and test pilots, but the helicopter pilots are out there, and they are getting it done.
Yeah.
Now, if you're privileged to attend one of her shows, one of her chat withs or what have you, and question and answer comes up, ask her one question. Tell us about Charlie Camarda. And these stories are just laugh out loud.
All right.
They are
the Bronx or New York Charlie Camarda.
Well, as Wendy will tell you, one of our guys on the crew, oh gosh, his name's gone right out of my head.
That's Charlie in the middle right there, right?
Andy Thomas. Andy Thomas spoke the Queen's English.
Yeah.
And Charlie Camarda spoke English from Queens.
Yes, right, there you go.
and she said that if you ever had to look for Charlie on a space station, it was really easy. All you had to do was follow the trail of debris from all the things he'd knocked off the wall while he was bouncing off the walls. Apparently, he moved this through the space station like a New York driver does through freeway traffic. I mean, he had no worries about what he was going to run into. He was just interested in getting to where he had to in any way he could. Now, if you go to that picture of Wendy inside the White Room, I wanted to bring up one thing in particular. The fact this picture so perfectly illustrates the calm inside the White Room. Now, people who come to the Visitors Complex and do Q&A and so forth, their interpretation is that, oh, people must be running around with their hair on fire and everybody's on pins and needles. No, it is a center of calm, particularly among that launch team, the White Room team, and the crew. And you can see that here so eloquently. We've all done this before. We did this at TCDT during the countdown demonstration tests. Everyone knows where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to be doing. And there is the quiet calm of professionalism in that picture. And I think it's perfectly illustrative of what it's like on launch day. You're professional, you're calm, you know your job, you know you're going to get it done. And there's a little time to reflect on the incredible nature of the day. So I was very impressed by that picture and want to put it in for.
That's a beautiful
for that
picture
reason,
there.
yeah.
With, Wendy Lawrence, don't miss her if you're out here at the Space Center. Her father was a Mercury finalist.
Right.
Don't
He
know
was-
why he didn't make it to Gemini, but
It was health issues. He
Okay.
tried out for Mercury, but he was disqualified for health reasons, which of course were very tight.
in
in
a
those days.
destroyer or
A
something?
destroyer is named after him, the USS William P. Lawrence. That
Uh-huh.
I was privileged to attend the not the christening, the first sailing, the commissioning
Commissioning.
of the ship.
Okay, yeah.
And that was in Alabama, and
Oh, well.
nobody does tradition like the United States Navy.
Yeah.
And it was just, you're privileged when you're there, and in some very small way, you come away from a ceremony like that and you feel part of the crew or part of the ship. And the officers and crew of the USS William P. Lawrence are in my prayers every night.
Oh, that's true.
That is what that experience has meant to me. And Wendy made that possible. She gave me the invitation, and I was privileged to go there and witness that marvelous day.
Yeah, I'm sure she's got a lot of pride for her dad and everything
Her
about
father, a Vietnam veteran, he was a POW at the Hanoi Hilton for 12 years.
Yes, that's right.
Came out of that experience, came home.
12 years? Oh, my
Eventually
gosh.
became the superintendent of the United States Naval Academy when Wendy was there. So, yeah, your dad is superintendent of the Naval
Yeah,
Academy.
yeah.
No pressure there.
No pressure there. Well, you stuck in this picture here, the 114 flight there.
Steve Robinson at the end of the space station robotic arm. And later
And
on,
Wendy's operating, by the way.
yeah, and later on, he was at the end of the shuttle arm, which had the orbital boom sensor system attached to it. And Wendy maneuvered him down beneath the shuttle so he could inspect that area where the tile had the gap filler that was sticking out. And as Wendy says, you give engineers something they've never seen before, and they are all over it. And they saw this gap filler sticking out from the pictures they took after the rotational pitch maneuver, and they said, oh God, this could trip the boundary layer and cause problems during reentry, so let's go in there and examine that and remove this gap filler, and that way we don't have the obstruction that would trip the boundary layer. And they thought they were going to need forceps and exert a lot of force, and Steve just reached in with his thumb and forefinger and pulled it out. It came out very easily, and they went back afterwards and did the engineering analysis and determined a way to keep that from happening again, and it did not. The problem with 114 was after the launch, we did determine that we were still losing foam off the external fuel tank, and we knew even while the mission was up in the air that we were going to be grounded for a while after this mission came back until we finally nailed that problem down. But every flight of a shuttle, I'm convinced, was an engineering test flight because we were always doing something new. We were certainly always learning something new on these flights, right to the last one, right up to 135. So it was, again, a remarkable program, and 114 was a big part of that.
That's why we love celebrating it on
Yeah.
Stay Curious, Nick. And 114 was followed by 121 was the next flight out of sequence, but it was a year later because of the issues that Nick described. Here's the crew on the International Space Station.
Yeah, and
in
Sergei Krikalev in the front there, and John, who was that? Phillips.
Yeah,
John
Phillips.
Phillips,
Yes.
To his right,
Andy
and then
Town.
the rest. You've got the 114 crew. Soichi Noguchi is up there just behind Andy, and Vegas, Jim Kelly right next to Soichi, and there's Charlie Camarda right behind Eileen, and Wendy next to him,
Tangled
and
up in the
then
wires.
Steve,
and
and then
at his feet.
Steve Robinson top right. So remarkable crew, remarkable flight, and it just boosted everyone's morale to have the orbiter flying again, and to have such a remarkable crew make that possible.
Absolutely, and returning safely. This was
Yeah.
not a daredevil mission for sure, but they certainly were
Sure.
had in their hearts the Columbia crew, and that they were going to make everything right. And then the final, the Omega of the program there,
flight of the
and
program.
how the patch is so beautifully shows the Alpha and the Omega,
Yeah.
the Omega sign there, in July 2011, 12 years ago.
And a remarkable thing that still to this day just gives me goosebumps. STS-135 landed on July 21st, 2011, exactly 50 years after Liberty Bell 7. And so the next day, because the crew landed at night or early morning, I can't remember which, but the next day after the mission and after work, I went out to Pad 5 and spent a little time out there where Gus had launched, and just took time to take stock of how far we'd come in 50 years and all the things that the shuttle program had made possible. And I think it's going to be another 50 years before the general public looks back and realizes how much we've gotten from the shuttle program. I mean, you have kids today who still don't realize all the advantages that we've reaped from Apollo, let alone shuttle. But the shuttle made so much possible from start to finish. And when you think of all the things that were unthinkable in 1981 when we started the shuttle program, and now all the things that had become possible and practically run-of-the-mill when we got to the end of 135, well, it's just breathtaking. It really, really is.
It certainly is. 3 decades that have changed our society, our world, and the International Space Station orbiting 17 times a day. To bring that home to us. There's the crew.
Here's our 135 crew, the smallest crew that we've fielded since the original test flights of the shuttle program. 4 people. And the reason for 4 people was we knew this was going to be the last shuttle flight, so we crammed that vehicle with all the logistics and supplies that we could, even in the mid-deck, and I think there was some up on the flight deck too, so long as it didn't constrict the astronauts' movements. But there you've got the crew. You got Rex Waldheim on the left. You got our pilot, Doug Hurley, and then our mission commander, Chris Ferguson, and mission specialist, Sandy Magnus. And again, a remarkable team. There's a lot of nostalgia among all of us as that vehicle was launched, and I took the time to document launch morning with my video camera at the time. And then at the end of the mission, when they came home for a landing, I went outside, stepped outside my apartment, and with my video camera, I recorded the last sonic boom of the space shuttle program.
Ooh.
So it was a very, very meaningful mission. It was bittersweet. You know, we didn't like leaving the shuttle behind, and we were apprehensive because we didn't really have a program in place to follow it with. We knew there were going to be some lean years ahead of us, but everybody in the program from top to finish, the attitude was, we're going to make this our best mission ever, and they did. Yeah.
Well, Doug Hurley there on the left commanded our return to flight with
on the Dragon, the first manned flight of the
Demo
Dragon.
2,
Right.
and 3 years ago, and with Bob Benkin, and then Chris Ferguson is a Boeing astronaut that's not going to fly anymore. He's over the manned segment of that. What's Sandy doing?
I don't know. I'd have to ask Wendy what Sandy's up to these days. I don't know what Rex is doing either. But Wendy did tell me a great story about Sandy when she came back from one of her shuttle missions. They went out and they had dinner together that night, and the waiter asked Sandy, "What would you like? What would you like to eat?" And she just replied, "Bring me everything that's green," because she'd had X number of days with all that freeze-dried food and MREs and so forth. So anything that was green,
celery, lettuce, that sounds good. But NASA did this well.
They really did.
Ending the program with the beginning, the Alpha and the Omega.
Alpha and Omega, just as you say. And this just illustrates the continuum of human exploration. I mean, hell, you could even draw all the way back to Christopher Columbus to get to this point if you wanted to. But shuttle program-wise, here we have our first crew of STS-1, John Young and Bob Crippen, followed by the crew of STS-135. And just an incredibly remarkable heritage from one crew to the next. As I say, all the things that were undreamed of when John and Cribb flew, and now all the things that are just thought of as being run-of-the-mill when Chris and his crew flew. And people in NASA understand and appreciate the concept of heritage. And here you've got heritage. This is a kind of, you could take this picture and you could carve it into a mountain and make it our version of Mount Rushmore. It's that meaningful and it's that impactful.
Yeah, 1981, STS-1, to 2011 STS-135.
Yeah, 30 years later.
Triumph and tragedy
Yeah,
all
everything
down
in
that line
between.
there.
But yeah, you got 30 years of heritage in that one picture.
Absolutely, and nonetheless, Mr. John Young there.
Oh yeah.
2 trips to the
What
moon
can you
and
say?
6
2
space
Geminis,
trips.
2 Apollos, 2 shuttles. Very little the man didn't do, and also a remarkable leader in the office.
Yeah,
And,
he was asked in a press pool one time I was in, John, what's of your 6 launches, which one's your most memorable? And he shook his head and he said, there was a 7th launch,
the one
off the moon.
Yeah.
All right, was the most important one, the one off the moon.
Yep.
He just shook his head, and I think he wanted to say, "You dumb bunny."
One engine, one circuit,
Yeah.
one try. That was it.
And Marty, our good buddy there, he helped arm the guillotine to slice all the wires,
all those connections
there from the ascent descent there. So certainly have enjoyed this. There is our beautiful shuttle.
Yeah, you can't take a bad picture of the shuttle or the Bahamas.
No, you
And
can't.
we've got them both right here. We've got Atlantis, our vehicle at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex. Come see it. Flying over the Bahamas, just as beautiful as any tall-masted sailing ship of the early centuries and any other vessel of exploration as she glides peacefully over the Bahamas. Just a beautiful, beautiful shot.
It is.
Here we are after the crew had come home. Of course, we landed, I said, in the darkness in the early morning hours, as I recall. And then the next morning, as the sun came up, as the vehicle was being towed back to the orbiter processing facility, the crew came out for a photo op and a visit with this vehicle. And that really had to be a heartfelt visit, because here you are, you're a member of the last shuttle crew, you're seeing the last vehicle being brought back to the hangar, and that's got to be a moment of great reflection, bittersweet possibly, but also a sense that, you know, you were very happy and very humbled to be a part of the last shuttle crew.
Absolutely. Well, we know Chris Kelly is watching and enjoying today. Doug Forrest, another artist, 2 artists there. Bill Whiting, that Michigan Spartan, was in the building here a little bit ago. Robert Law's up in Dundee, Scotland. I'll bet you enjoyed that golf tournament up there that I watched. We have Sacramento Children's Museum has been staying curious. Tom Usiak, thank you, Tommy, for watching.
Tom.
Gary Gerald. I got a Vidalia onion if you want it from Gary Gerald's farm up there.
Okay.
Bonnie Smitty's watching. Space Monkey's watching. Tony Achilles, thank you. I know you bought something at the auction, Tony. Carlton Bailey's watching from his wildlife preserve at home there. Bennett Scarborough. Mikey Haddad, hope you're enjoying the show, Mikey. Tell me what day you want to come on and stay curious with payloads. Fox McLeod's watching. Lynn Langford McDaniel's watching over in the Tampa area. And Mitchell Rothman is watching today. So thank you all.
For my side, I'd like to call out some of my friends who will be watching this in replay. There'll be Jack Lausma and Terry Wilcott, Steve Smith, my nephew, Tom Miller, and his family, and all my friends out there, and all the people who love the space program, who watch Stay Curious, who stay up to date with us and continue to follow and support man's greatest adventure, which is the exploration of space.
Well put. Thank you so much. It means so much that you're a friend and have friends that wanted to embrace our museum. We want to just go out with a reminder that we do have 10 humans orbiting the Earth, 7 on our International Space Station right there. And we've got, there's our Expedition 69 crew.
Yep.
And we're gearing up for Jasmine Magoli to be the rookie commander. She's a Marine for the Crew 7 that's going to go up in August 17th, I think's the date.
And we also want to tip the hat to Frank Rubio and his 2 crewmates that are going to end up spending just over a year in space as a result of that leak of their original Soyuz spacecraft. They were destined for a 6-month stint. Then that Soyuz sprung a leak in the propellant lines, and they went ahead and let it go and let it burn up in the atmosphere. And then they sent one up automated, And of course, the mission manager said, "Well, you guys should be good for another 6 months." And, yeah, we're good for another 6 months. So Frank and his crewmates are going to, I think they're going to be the first ones to cross that 365-day mark, and they should come up with a special patch for that.
They should. Frank, Dimitri, and the commander, Prokolov, that's that crew there. They've been up there 300 days already.
Yeah.
And we've got the Sultan up there, and Woody Hobaugh, and Steve Bowen. They've been up there for 137 days. Steve had 40 days on a shuttle.
One of our Navy submariners.
Yeah. Back-to-back missions, too. The only person to go 2 missions in a row.
You know who else has gone 2 missions in a row was back in the shuttle days, and that was Pinky Nelson.
Oh, did he?
Pinky flew on the last shuttle mission, and then he flew on STS-26.
That's right, 26.
So Pinky was the first to have back-to-back flights.
Now you're staying curious with Nick Thomas, all right, giving us some good stuff there. So we've got 3 Russians, 3 Americans, and a United Arab Emirates. And we got 3 Chinese on their Tiangong space station. They've been up there for 48 days. Humans orbited the Earth since 1961. And, Mike, astronaut Mike Baker liked this, as he pointed out, I'm one of the few, in there. And Marty coined the phrase karmanauts. We want to separate the humans who orbited Earth. That's easy to figure out. Okay, though we'll give Gagarin an orbit because he's really 7/8 of an orbit. He landed on his own 2 feet. But that's the numbers as they stand today, and about 40 suborbital people that we call karmanauts. So, Nick, thank you so much for supporting Stay Curious this way, and we love Delaware North and what they're always doing out there. It's worth the ticket, whatever they charge out there, just to see Atlantis. I guarantee it. But this is a worldwide company that they keep the place clean. They're always doing pressure washing. And I saw them painting in the Rocket Garden again. It's a fabulous, well-kept place.
Rocket Garden is our first impression, and we want to make it a good one. And that highlights the fact that Delaware North understands the need for the balance between being a place that is entertaining, but also a place that holds the heritage of the American manned space program. Very important to them, and they highlight that in everything they do. The fact that this is a repository of all that history and a place where the young people are going to learn about it, where the older folks are going to relive their memories of having been a part of it. And they take that responsibility very, very seriously, and they have executed it to a T. It's really remarkable out there.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. As well said, we enjoy it right here in our backyard, and you can vacation there. Forget about those attractions in Disney World and all that, Universal for a couple days, and go see where America has always been a world leader, and that is in space. So thank you, Nick Thomas. Thank you, Marty, for a great Streamlabs job.
Thank you, Martin.
And tomorrow we're going to have Terry White, the shuttle garage manager. Terry will be here and talk some about STS 135.
He of the bulletproof mustache.
That's right, with his handlebar mustache. He had his son and daughter on the show last month, and that was awesome. She's a Navy veteran, and his son's been 4 times deployed in the Middle East situation there and going to Alaska. So Terry White will be here tomorrow, and he'll have some great stories. Tell your friends to go to YouTube and watch this program again, as Nick Thomas just told you some tales that only he can tell, and we appreciate that. So until tomorrow, I'm Mark Marquette saying we can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.